The rain didn't fall. It hunted. Needle-fine, wind-driven sheets chased Isabella Cruz up Lexington like a pack, soaking her blazer, blurring streetlights into smeared halos. She checked her dead phone again. A reflex, a prayer. No charge, no directions, no time. Harrison and Partners had given her a 7:30 table at Roselli's to discuss a position she could barely admit she wanted. Associate, commercial design, an actual path out of drafting basements and exposure projects that never paid. 28 minutes late. Her stomach clenched tight enough to bruise. She scanned the block through the rain. Brass-trimmed doors, valet umbrellas, a bright R. Was that an R? She squinted at a carved wooden sign above a pair of heavy oak doors. Villa. Something. Italian script flourished like a signature. Good enough. She grabbed the handle, wrenched it open, and stepped out of the storm into a hush so complete it felt curated. The first thing she registered was warmth, the kind that smelled faintly of lemon oil and old wood, not steam heat. The second was light, a constellation of alabaster sconces, candles breathing gold onto crisp tablecloths, crystal glinting like patient stars. The third was the man in the back corner, alone. He didn't try to be noticed. He was the kind of presence that bent the room around him, attention settling as naturally as dust. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair combed back without shine, a suit that looked like it had been cut for him and not for a mannequin. He didn't fidget, didn't glance at a phone. He ate as if time belonged to him. Isabella pressed her palms to her hair, smoothing it back, pushing rain off her cheeks. The host, thin, nervous, deferential, appeared at her elbow, already offering a towel, already apologizing for something she hadn't asked yet. "Hi," she said, breathless. "Reservation for Harrison? Harrison and Partners? I'm disastrously late." "I am very sorry, Signorina," the host said gently. "We have no reservation under that name." She forced a smile. "Roselli's? This is Roselli's, right?" The host's expression flickered. "This is Villa De Luca." The name hit like a soft thud in her chest. Not Roselli's. Wrong door. The kind of mistake that seemed small and felt fatal. She was already turning back toward the rain when she heard it. "Wait." The voice came from the corner table, smooth, low, an accent braided into the vowels. The man stood with the unhurried grace of a dancer and a general. He didn't smile so much as soften the sharpness of his face. "You are soaked," he said, not a question. "Stay a minute, warm up. You can call a car." "My phone's dead," she managed. I'm late for a meeting." "A few minutes will not save or ruin anything now," he said. He gestured to the chair across from him, as if he were inviting her into a private chapel. "Sit. Have something hot. Then you can go." It should have been easy to refuse. Stranger, wrong restaurant, a silence in the staff that wasn't exactly fear and wasn't exactly reverence. But the storm hurled itself at the window with a hollow boom, and she heard herself answer, 5 minutes. He pulled out the chair himself. Up close, he smelled like dry cedar and winter air, a cologne so understated it read as memory more than scent. He signaled, and the host materialized with a towel and a small copper pot of chocolate so thick it leaned toward velvet. "I'm Isabella," she said, too aware of her damp sleeves, her heartbeat, the way her handwriting would shake if she had to sign anything. "Lorenzo," he said. "De Luca." The name carried the room with it. Isabella had grown up on stories of certain names, Queen's legends delivered over dinner, whispered on job sites, spoken around union tables with a cocktail of disdain and respect. De Luca wasn't one of the worst. It was one of the ones people pronounced carefully. "Thank you for this," she said, wrapping both hands around the little porcelain cup. Heat sank into her fingers, uncurled something knotted tight behind her ribs. "I was supposed to meet Partners at Roselli's. I must have misread the sign through the rain." "Roselli's is 2 blocks down," Lorenzo said. "They do a good branzino. Tonight the storm takes what it wants, even reservations." The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile. "What is the meeting?" "An interview, sort of. Architecture." She tried to laugh and heard the brittleness in it. "I design, or I want to design. Not just permit sets and emergency bathrooms. Real places. Spaces that make people feel connected. He watched her with a stillness that didn't pinch or judge, only made her aware of how seldom anyone listened without waiting for their turn to speak. You speak like someone who's been told to want a smaller dream and refused. My parents immigrated, she said, surprised by how easily the words rose. My dad poured concrete for 30 years, then supervised on high-rises until his knees told him to stop. My mom is a nurse who always comes home smelling like sanitizer and peppermint gum. They used to drive us past buildings and say, "Look at that. Somebody thought of it and then it was real." I want that. The honest version. The honest version, he echoed, tasting the phrase. And what is the dishonest version? Shiny and empty, she said. Spaces you walk through without seeing because they were never made for you. The waiter arrived with a small plate of crostini brushed with oil and a stack of basil leaves so green they looked illegal. Isabella hadn't ordered. The basil cracked under her teeth and tasted like July and patios and a different life. You own this place, she said, realizing it in the way the waiter didn't ask for orders, in the way the staff's gaze touched him and skittered away like minnows. My family does, he said, neither proud nor evasive. He lifted his glass, and the candlelight turned the whiskey a deeper amber. We own things. We keep them. We make them last. Restaurants, she said carefully, and more. And more, he agreed, not filling the silence with lies. He let his focus rest on her like a hand between her shoulder blades, steadying without pressure. Tell me about the building you can't stop sketching. The question struck bone. She found herself sketching in air with words. A mixed-use block in a neglected pocket of the East River waterfront, with ground-floor groceries that smelled like cumin and cinnamon, with daycare sunlight and clinic modesty, with a rooftop garden that caught the city's wind and broke it into gentle breezes. She talked about courtyards shallow enough for winter sun, about staircases that earned their keep by being beautiful, about units a mother could push a stroller through without apologizing to the walls. When she ran out of air, he was still looking at her like a problem he wanted to solve. Not her. The world that made a person ask permission to want. You would need money, he said, not charity, patience. Protection from the kind of hands that take a project apart piece by piece, until nothing remains but a plaque and a spreadsheet. Isabella's smile faltered. The room's hush felt different suddenly, a frequency her bones could hear. The front door opened without sound. 2 men in dark suits came in from the storm, not wet, not rushed. They looked like they had been poured into the night and then shaken into human shape. One had a scar interrupting his eyebrow like a bad edit. The host met them, bowing a little too far, and pointed. Here, the gesture said. Here. Lorenzo's posture changed imperceptibly, a tide turning under the surface. His voice did not. Isabella, he said, as if making conversation about wine. Stand up. Take your cup. Walk to the restrooms, left hallway. Lock the door and wait for me to knock 3 times. Her mouth went dry. What is... Now, he said, quiet and absolute. He didn't look at her. He looked past her and smiled the way a chess player smiles at an opening he hoped the other man would take. She stood, her chair barely whispering across the carpet. She picked up the cup because he had told her to, and because a ridiculous part of her believed the gesture would let the moment pretend to be civilized for another 5 seconds. She walked toward the hallway while the storm flung itself harder at the windows, counting her breaths, listening to the soft thunder of men's feet on expensive carpet. At the corner she glanced back. Lorenzo was no longer alone at the table. The men had flanked him, one leaning in to murmur, the other standing loose at the shoulder like a coat he could shrug off. Lorenzo answered in Italian, cool and precise. The taller man's mouth tightened. The shorter one's hand shifted in a way anyone who had a father on construction sites would recognize, making sure weight and cloth fell right around something heavy at the hip. Isabella ducked into the women's room and slid the bolt with a metallic click that sounded both loud and useless. Marble, soft lighting. An arrangement of white peonies that looked like they'd been selected at dawn. Her face in the mirror was pale against wet hair, her mascara holding on out of spite. She held the cup between her palms because it felt like a job and she needed one. Voices rose and fell beyond the door. Italian cutting like polished knives. Then English. Then, startling in its abruptness, silence, broken by the fast shatter of glass. A muttered curse, a chair's legs dragging, a grunt like something heavy catching a body's breath. Isabella pressed herself against the far wall and tried to become grout. She counted, 5s into 3s into nothing. The air conditioner hummed like a polite apology. Someone laughed once, not with humor. Metal kissed wood. Her body remembered her father teaching her how to distinguish sounds. Nail gun, pipe wrench, police siren, thunder close versus thunder far. This wasn't any of those. It was the sound of a door turned from invitation into threat. Then nothing. The kind of nothing that makes you realize how loud your own blood can be. 3 careful knocks. "Isabella," Lorenzo said, voice low through the door. "It's me." She hesitated, only because hesitating made her feel like she had any power at all. Then unlatched the bolt. He stood with his suit jacket open and his tie slightly askew, the shift so minor it read as violence in a language of fabrics. There was a thin cut high on his cheekbone, beaded but not messy, a red punctuation mark in an otherwise perfect sentence. "Are you hurt?" he asked. No. Are you?" She lifted a hand and stopped it in midair before it reached his face. He didn't answer that question. He stepped aside and gestured for her to walk in front of him, back to the dining room, as if anything about this could be normal again. The room had been edited, objects moved a few inches too far to one side, a glass tipped, a chair missing from its pair. No blood, no men. The staff had vanished into the building's bones. "What happened?" she asked, the words small. "A conversation that ended," he said. "You shouldn't have been here to hear it." "You told me to stay," she said, anger coming in hot now that fear had passed. "You told me to—" "I told you to lock the door." His tone didn't sharpen, but it cooled. "You did. Good." She wanted to say she wasn't trained to be obedient in private dining rooms, wasn't built for codes she hadn't chosen, wasn't a piece on anyone's board. Instead, she set the little cup on the edge of a table and noticed her hands were perfectly steady. That frightened her more than anything else. "I need to go," she said. I need to go." He nodded once, as if she'd completed a task he'd assigned. "I'll have a driver take you. I can get a cab." "No." He looked at the window, where rain bounced in the orange streetlight like a broken string of pearls. "A car will take you to your door. You will go up without stopping. You will not answer questions. Tonight does not exist. You were never here." Something in the way he said it made her feel claimed, and she bristled. "You don't get to tell me what You were never here," he repeated, softer. Not a command this time, a protection or a curse. "Please." The driver appeared exactly when the door opened, as if the car had been waiting all night for the right scene cue. Isabella slid into the back of a black sedan that smelled like clean leather and new money. Villa De Luca receded in the rear window, its stone facade swallowing rain, light turning its windows into unnamed eyes. On the sidewalk, Lorenzo stood with his hands in his pockets and his face turned up to the storm, as if asking the sky a favor he wasn't used to asking anyone. Her building's lobby looked smaller than it had that morning. The elevator bucked once between floors, and she pressed her shoulder into the wall, counting down from 20 like a child and a surgeon. Inside her apartment, she peeled off wet clothes and stood barefoot on the cheap rug, listening to the heat knock in the pipes like a neighbor. She told herself she would tell no one because there was nothing to tell. A wrong door, a cup of chocolate, a conversation in a language that left fingerprints on silence. Sleep came like a truce that wouldn't hold. When she woke, her phone had decided to forgive her and took a charge. 2 voicemails from an unknown number waited like teeth behind a smile. She deleted the first without listening. She played the second and froze at the voice. "Miss Cruz," a woman said, warm and smooth and edged with something metallic. "This is Sophia Moretti. I work closely with Mr. De Luca. He asked me to deliver something to you personally. It concerns a project you once described. I'll be by your apartment tomorrow at 6. No question, no request. Appointment set by a stranger using her name like a key. Isabella stared at the phone until the screen dimmed and her own reflection looked back at her. Hair tamed, eyes awake, mouth uncertain. She told herself not to open the door. At 5:59, a precise knock, 3 times, not loud. She stood on the other side of wood and paint and limits and thought about a rooftop garden catching the city wind and breaking it into gentleness. About stairs that beg to be climbed. About how easy it is to mistake inevitability for fate. She reached for the chain, curled cold metal in her fingers, and felt the tension snap taut between this moment and whatever waited on the other side. Morning came muted, a pale wash of gray seeping through thin curtains, soft enough to make the night before feel like a fever dream. But the bruised skyline outside Isabella's window told her it hadn't been a dream. The storm had raged, the wrong door had opened, and she had sat across from a man whose gaze could make silence feel like confession. Her apartment smelled faintly of damp wool and cold coffee. The clothes she'd draped over the chair were still damp, and the unfinished sketches on her drafting table looked suddenly naive. Boxes and lines pretending they could keep the world in order. Isabella stood barefoot on the wooden floor, her hair pulled into a loose knot, the echo of Lorenzo's voice still replaying in her head. You were never here. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to erase the night, chalk it up to exhaustion and chance. But every time she blinked, she saw him standing in the doorway of Villa De Luca, rain streaking down the windows, a cut glinting like a warning on his cheek. She shook herself back into routine. Coffee, shower, pressed blazer. Today she would meet Mark Harrison, apologize for missing the dinner, and pray for a second chance. Maybe the universe would be merciful. Maybe. At exactly 9:03 her phone buzzed, a number she didn't know. She froze. The memory of that message, that calm, precise voice, slithered back. Miss Cruz, this is Sophia Moretti. I work with Mr. De Luca. He asked me to bring something to you personally. The words had sounded polite then. Now they felt inevitable. Her instinct screamed, don't answer. Her curiosity whispered, what if you don't have a choice? She silenced the phone and grabbed her bag. Work would anchor her. Walls, blueprints, schedules, they obeyed. Men like Lorenzo did not. The subway was merciless, packed and humming, the smell of wet coats and burnt espresso clinging to the air. Isabella found a seat near the window and let the rhythm of the train blur the city into fragments. Graffiti, brick, strangers' reflections layered over her own. She replayed every moment, the deference of the staff, the foreign words that sliced the air, the way he'd looked at her like he was reading a blueprint only he could understand. Who was he, truly? She'd heard the name De Luca whispered before, in stories her father told when union contracts went missing, when inspectors looked the other way, when projects got approved overnight. But Lorenzo hadn't looked like a villain. He'd looked like a man who understood what it meant to carry weight, and to hide it behind silk and silence. At work, she barely heard Mark's apology for missing her the night before. We assumed you got caught in the storm, he said. No worries. We'll reschedule next week. Relief fluttered through her chest. Maybe fate wasn't cruel, just clumsy. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time the office door opened, her shoulders tensed. By noon, she'd checked the hallway twice, half expecting to see a familiar silhouette leaning against the wall. Dark suit, patient eyes, nothing. By evening, she convinced herself she'd imagined it. She closed her laptop, stuffed her portfolio into her bag, and walked home through a city dripping gold from sunset. The storm had washed everything clean, or so it seemed. At 5:58, the knock came. 3 precise taps, measured, controlled. Her pulse leapt. She stood motionless, hand frozen above the doorknob. The apartment felt too small, the air too thin. She looked through the peephole. The woman outside was beautiful in a way that required effort. Sleek black hair, tailored camel coat, lipstick the color of wine. A small envelope rested in her hand. Miss Cruz, the woman called gently, her accent faint but deliberate. Mr. De Luca asked me to bring this to you. May I come in? Sophia Moretti. The voice from the message. Isabella opened the door, just a crack, keeping the chain latched. "What is this about?" Sophia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "A professional opportunity. You made quite an impression." "That was a mistake. I shouldn't have even been there." "Perhaps. Or perhaps you were meant to walk through that door." Her tone carried the weight of certainty. Mr. DeLuca believes talent reveals itself at the right moment. She lifted the envelope slightly. "May I?" Isabella hesitated, then slid the chain free. Sophia stepped inside as if she owned the air. Her perfume lingered, jasmine and smoke, expensive, assertive. The envelope was thick, sealed with wax. Isabella opened it carefully. Blueprints. Detailed, immaculate, breathtaking. A mixed-use development, exactly like the one she'd described to Lorenzo. Community housing, retail, open courtyards, rooftop gardens. The lines were elegant, the structure ambitious yet humane. Her dream, laid out in precise ink. At the bottom, a note in looping handwriting. For the architect who builds not just walls, but hope. LD. Isabella stared. "What is this?" "A proposal," Sophia said smoothly. "Mr. DeLuca has acquired a block in the East River District. He wants you to lead the design. This can't be real. It's very real. The permits are in motion. The funding is secured. He considers it a collaboration." Isabella blinked. "Why me?" "Because you see more than square footage. You see purpose. And because when Lorenzo DeLuca finds someone he trusts, he invests." The word trusts sounded more like claims. Sophia took a slow look around the apartment. The thrift store bookshelf, the drafting table crowded with sketches, the small framed photo of Isabella's parents in front of a half-built house. "You live simply," she said, not unkindly, but with faint surprise. "You could do more." "I like my life." "Do you?" Sophia tilted her head. "Or do you like believing it's safe?" The question hung between them. "What's the catch?" Isabella asked finally. "Only discretion. Mr. DeLuca's enterprises are diverse. You will not ask unnecessary questions about his investors, and he will not interfere with your artistic vision. And if I say no?" Sophia's smile hardened, polished steel beneath velvet. "Refusing such generosity might be misunderstood. He would take it personally." Isabella's heart kicked hard. "Are you threatening me?" "Of course not. Merely advising you to consider the opportunity carefully. He'll be expecting your answer tomorrow evening. Villa DeLuca. 9 o'clock. Sophia turned toward the door, heels clicking in perfect rhythm. Dress professionally. He appreciates precision. And then she was gone. The silence she left behind was heavier than her presence. Isabella spread the blueprints across her coffee table. They were perfect, every measurement a whisper of her own voice, every choice a reflection of her ideals. It was as if he'd reached inside her imagination and built it for her. Her hands trembled. Accepting meant success, recognition, financial stability, the chance to build something meaningful. But it also meant entanglement with a man whose business disagreements left shattered glass and silence. Her father's voice echoed from memory. "You build honest, Bella. You sleep straight when the walls are true." But another voice, smooth, deep, unshakable, countered, "Sometimes fate brings us exactly where we need to be, even when we think we are lost." She leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling as the city hummed below. The choice before her wasn't about architecture. It was about power, and faith, and danger. The rain had stopped, but something far more unpredictable had begun. Tomorrow night she would walk back into Villa DeLuca, not by accident this time. Still, one question clawed at the edges of her resolve, refusing to fade. If fate had opened the wrong door once, what would it demand when she stepped through it again? The city was alive again. After 2 days of gray drizzle, the night had turned crisp, washed clean by rain and lit with the glow of promise, or warning. From the back seat of the cab, Isabella watched Manhattan glide by like a fever dream she was still trying to wake from. Her fingers toyed with the corner of the envelope, the one she hadn't been able to return, the one that carried her dream, drawn with another man's ink. She'd told herself she was coming to decline, to thank him politely, hand back the blueprints, and walk away with her conscience intact. Yet as the taxi turned onto East 74th, her heartbeat drummed louder than her thoughts, because some part of her, a reckless part that sounded far too much like him, whispered that this wasn't about business anymore. The car rolled to a stop before Villa de Luca, its stone facade rising elegant and unbothered, like the storm had never touched it. Tonight, the restaurant wasn't empty. Couples lingered over wine, laughter soft as candlelight. It could have been any fine Italian restaurant, if not for the men in dark suits posted discreetly near the door, their eyes too alert for hospitality. The maitre d' recognized her instantly. "Miss Cruz," he said, inclining his head. "Mr. De Luca is expecting you." Of course he was. She followed him past linen tables and warm lighting to the same corner where fate had played its cruel trick. Lorenzo stood when he saw her, his expression unreadable, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Tonight he wasn't merely commanding, he was immaculate. A charcoal suit, no tie, the top button undone, a single cufflink glinting like a secret. "Isabella," he said, "I wasn't sure you'd come. I almost didn't. Yet here you are." His gaze lingered, steady, unflinching. "Sit. Please." She hesitated, then did. The chair creaked softly under her tension. A waiter appeared as if summoned by thought, pouring her a glass of Barolo before vanishing again. Isabella didn't touch it. Lorenzo folded his hands on the table. "Did you look at the plans?" "Yes." "And?" "They're beautiful," she admitted. "Exactly the kind of project I've always wanted to create. But I need to know what I'd be getting into." "Getting into?" "Working with you." Her voice steadied. "Your world, your business, whatever this is." He studied her face, expression calm but eyes sharper than glass. "You're asking if I'm dangerous. I'm asking if you're honest." That earned the faintest smile. "Honesty is a rare currency, but I'll give you what I can. I come from a family that built stability where others built chaos. We protect what is ours. Sometimes protection looks like business. Sometimes business looks like war. But everything I do has purpose." "That sounds like justification." "Maybe." He leaned back. "But tell me, Isabella, have you ever built something that survived bureaucracy without compromise? Every system is corrupt. You know this. Permits are bought. Inspectors bribed. Developers cut corners. The difference is, I don't pretend otherwise." She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Architecture had taught her plenty about the dirt beneath marble foundations. He continued, voice quiet but commanding. "I'm offering you resources, land, funding, freedom. No committee to tell you your vision is too ambitious. No investors chasing quick profit. Just build, create, leave something behind that outlasts both of us." "Nothing is free, Lorenzo." "You're right." His gaze softened. "So let's speak plainly. What do you want?" She hadn't planned to list demands. But now, sitting before him, heart pounding in rhythm with the city outside, words rose like a vow. "First," she said, "I have complete creative control. No interference, no last-minute demands to turn it into another soulless glass tower." "Agreed." "Second, every worker on that site gets fair pay, full safety standards, benefits. I won't build on exploitation." His brow lifted slightly. "Of course." "Third, 20% of the residential units stay below market rate for low-income families. This isn't just luxury, it's community." Now he smiled. "You have a generous heart. I have a conscience." "Keep it," he said. "It's rarer than steel." She hesitated, then drew a slow breath. "Fourth, if I do this, if I work with you, I need to know who you really are. No more smoke, No more riddles. The air between them tightened. The low hum of jazz from the corner faded to a thread. For the first time, Lorenzo looked almost human, torn between instinct and honesty. "My family came from Naples," he began. "My father believed power was responsibility. He taught us to provide what the city denied: security, justice, order. Some call that criminal. I call it necessary. Do you hurt people?" "Only when I must." His answer was immediate, unflinching. "Never for pleasure, never without cause." "That's not exactly comforting. It's the truth. The world isn't divided between saints and monsters, Isabella. It's built by men who make impossible choices, and women brave enough to hold them accountable." She held his gaze. "And if I say no?" He exhaled slowly. "Then you'll walk out of here, and I'll wish you well. You'll go back to small projects, late nights, and fighting for permission to dream. The city will keep swallowing architects with vision and spitting out draftsmen who obey. But your conscience will be clean." She almost laughed, bitter, breathless. "That's manipulation. That's reality." Silence stretched between them, heavy but alive. Her mind raced, ambition clashing with fear, morality with desire. Because the truth was, she believed him. The power, the danger. It wasn't performance. It was gravity. He reached across the table, not to take her hand, but to rest his palm near hers. Close enough for warmth, far enough for choice. "I won't pretend I'm a good man," he said quietly. "But I can promise you this. If you build with me, no one will touch you. Not the banks, not the bureaucrats, not the men who break what they can't control. I'll protect you and what you create." She stared at his hand, the faint scars across his knuckles, the steadiness in his fingers. Power, restrained. "This isn't just a project, is it?" she asked. "No," he said simply. "It's an alliance." The word echoed, heavy and binding. Isabella looked down at the blueprints, her dream, drawn by a man who lived in shadows. The city she wanted to change. The woman she wanted to become. Could both exist in the same life? Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. "If I say yes, I set the terms, and you keep your word. You have it. And if you break it?" His eyes darkened, but not with anger, with something closer to reverence. "Then I lose the one thing I can't buy back, your trust." She didn't answer, not yet. She needed air, distance, a chance to think without the pull of his gravity. Lorenzo seemed to understand. He rose, slow and graceful, and pulled her chair back for her. "Take your time," he said. "The city waits for no one." "But I will." She nodded, tucking the envelope under her arm, heart thrumming like a trapped bird. As she stepped out into the cool night, the wind caught her hair, the city lights gleaming like possibilities scattered across dark water. Behind her, Villa de Luca loomed, a fortress of elegance and danger. Ahead, the street opened into endless choices. She took one step, then another. The echo of his words followed her down the sidewalk, haunting and magnetic. "We build what lasts, Isabella, even if the world calls it a mistake." She stopped under a street lamp, clutching the blueprints to her chest. Somewhere deep inside, a decision was forming, quiet but certain. But for the first time, she wondered not if she would accept, but whether he had already decided she would. The first strike of a hammer echoed like a promise. At dawn, the old warehouses on the East River block came alive, bulldozers grumbling, sparks flying, steel skeletons rising where decay had slept. The project the city had laughed at, delayed, buried in red tape, was suddenly moving, fast, unstoppable. And at the center of it all stood Isabella Cruz, hard hat in hand, boots caked in dust, eyes bright with the fire of creation. She should have felt triumphant, but the applause in her chest carried an undertone she couldn't name, a whisper of caution, of deals made behind closed doors. From the makeshift site office, she could see Lorenzo speaking to a group of contractors, his voice low, precise, carrying authority like gravity. The men nodded quickly, no questions asked. One of them, thick-necked, tattoo peeking above his collar, crossed himself before walking off. When Lorenzo turned toward her, the edge in his expression softened, replaced by a warmth that was beginning to feel dangerously familiar. "Progress," he said, joining her. "Faster than the city ever expected." "Too fast," she replied. "Permits like this don't appear overnight." His gaze held hers. "They do when someone believes. Or when someone pays," she countered quietly. He didn't deny it. "What matters is the result. Families will live here. Children will grow here. Beauty will rise where blight stood. You make corruption sound noble." He smiled faintly. "I make necessity sound honest." She wanted to argue. She always wanted to argue with him. But the sight before her silenced protest. Steel beams gleamed in the morning light, forming the first outlines of her design, of the dream she'd drawn 1,000 times in notebooks. It was real, tangible, hers, and his. By the third week, her name had begun to circulate in architectural circles, the young Latina visionary behind the DeLuca development. Critics called the project ambitious, progressive, miraculous. No one asked how it had leapt from proposal to construction in record time. Isabella buried herself in work. Site inspections, material meetings, late nights redlining plans until her eyes blurred. It was easier to focus on walls and windows than the shadows that lurked just beyond the floodlights. But shadows don't stay patient. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Isabella was reviewing blueprints with her foreman, Tony, when a black SUV rolled up to the gate. 2 men stepped out, not city inspectors, not investors. They carried themselves with the casual threat of men who didn't need introductions. "We need to speak with your boss," one said, looking straight at her. "I'm the project lead," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "What's this about?" The man smirked. "Sweetheart, I said your boss, Mr. DeLuca." Before she could respond, a familiar voice sliced through the air like a blade. "She is the boss." Lorenzo approached from behind her, jacket draped over his shoulders, expression unreadable. The men shifted, unease flickering in their eyes. "We just came to remind you," one began, "that this is our block." "Not anymore," Lorenzo said, calm as still water. "You sold it, or forgot you did. Either way, it's under our protection now." "Protection," the taller man repeated, spitting the word like a curse. "You're expanding too far, Lorenzo. Not everyone's happy about it." Lorenzo took a slow step forward. "Happiness is optional. Respect is not." Something unspoken passed between them. Then, with a muttered oath, the men retreated, sliding into the SUV and disappearing into traffic. Isabella exhaled only when the sound of the engine faded. Who were they? People who confuse nostalgia with ownership. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters. He turned to her, his tone softening. "You're safe, Isabella, always." Safe. The word clanged hollow, because she'd seen the look in those men's eyes. Fear mixed with fury, and in Lorenzo's, something colder, something final. That night she stayed late at the site, tracing light across glass facades on the model, imagining families moving through the future halls. She was so absorbed she didn't notice the flicker of headlights until a worker shouted from the scaffolding. Hey, something's wrong with..." The explosion cut him off. A shockwave tore through the eastern perimeter, rattling windows, scattering sparks. Dust and smoke erupted, swallowing the site in chaos. Screams echoed. Sirens flared in the distance. Isabella stumbled, heart hammering, coughing through debris. "Tony, everyone okay?" Voices shouted, panicked but alive. She spotted twisted metal where a generator had stood, sabotaged, clearly. This wasn't an accident. Before fear could settle, strong arms pulled her back from the wreckage. Lorenzo, his face streaked with dust, eyes burning with fury. "Are you hurt?" "No, what?" He scanned the damage, jaw tightening. "Stay back, don't touch anything." "Lorenzo, this was deliberate." "I know." His tone brooked no doubt. "They sent a message." "And what are you going to do?" He looked at her, and for a heartbeat she saw not the businessman, not the benefactor, but the man from that night in the restaurant, the one who commanded rooms and silenced threats with a word. "Whatever it takes," he said. "Lorenzo." He turned to one of his men who'd arrived in seconds, murmured something in Italian and sent him running into the darkness. When he faced her again, the edge had dulled, replaced by something gentler. "Go home. You don't need to see what comes next." "No," she said, defiant. "This is my project, my people. You can't—" "I can protect you, or I can explain," he interrupted. "Not both." The words struck deep, a choice disguised as mercy. He brushed a streak of soot from her cheek, his touch brief but grounding. "You built something worth fighting for. Let me fight." She wanted to argue, to demand honesty, to tell him she didn't need a savior. But as his men began cordoning off the site, as the acrid scent of burned fuel filled the air, Isabella realized there were battles fought with permits and plans, and others fought in the dark, far from the blueprints. She wasn't sure which side she was standing on anymore. The next morning, the city papers called it an accident. Faulty wiring at DeLuca development site, no injuries. Isabella stared at the headline, the lie clean and precise. When she confronted Lorenzo in his office, he was already waiting, sleeves rolled, coffee untouched. "You fixed it," she said. "I contained it," he corrected. "You have deadlines. Investors get nervous. Workers lose faith. The story had to end before it began. You think you can control everything. I can control what threatens you. That's not the same." He stepped closer, his voice low. "You're building something beautiful in a city that rewards cruelty. Don't let morality stop you from finishing what you started. Maybe it's not morality. Maybe it's sanity. Sanity doesn't build cathedrals, Isabella." She met his gaze, seeing both the protector and the storm. "And what does?" "Belief," he said simply. "And a little ruthlessness." She wanted to hate him for the calm certainty. But part of her, the part that watched the skyline rise, the part that felt alive in the roar of machinery and ambition, understood. Still, as she left his office, she glanced back at him, framed by glass and shadow. A man made of contradictions, savior and sinner, dreamer and destroyer. Outside, the city hummed, unaware, uncaring, magnificent. Isabella pulled her coat tighter, the blueprint tube slung across her shoulder like a weapon. The tower they were building would change the skyline, maybe even the city itself. But beneath the steel and light, secrets were pouring the foundation. And if one crack formed, the whole thing could collapse. She looked up at the rising frame of her dream and whispered to the wind, "Who do I become if I let this stand?" The only answer was the clang of iron, steady, relentless, echoing through the dusk like a heartbeat she couldn't silence. The city had learned her name. Isabella Cruz. Articles called her the heart behind the steel, the voice of a new skyline. She should have been celebrating. The site hummed with progress. The workers greeted her with respect, and every morning she watched a piece of her vision reach toward the clouds. Yet beneath every beam and bolt, she sensed something else rising, a tension she couldn't draft away. She hadn't seen Lorenzo in 4 days. Not a call, not a message. Only the distant echo of his influence, inspectors arriving with newfound cooperation, suppliers offering impossible discounts, disputes resolved before they began. His hand was everywhere and nowhere, shaping outcomes from shadows. That evening, as the city slipped into dusk, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The back door opened without sound. Inside, the driver's silhouette waited, wordless, familiar. Lorenzo's man. "Miss Cruz," he said, "Mr. DeLuca requests your company." She wanted to refuse, to claim exhaustion, deadlines, autonomy. But curiosity had always been her weakness, and something in the driver's eyes told her this wasn't a request one declined. The car wound north through Manhattan, trading neon for brownstone, noise for hush. They turned onto a private lane lined with old oaks and iron lamps, the kind of street the city pretended didn't exist. When the car stopped, Isabella stepped into another century. The DeLuca estate rose behind a wrought iron gate. Stone walls veined with ivy, lanterns flickering against carved balconies. It was both fortress and museum, a place built to endure storms. Lorenzo met her at the entrance, his jacket gone, shirt sleeves rolled, a faint smear of graphite across his hand. The sight startled her. He looked unguarded. "You came," he said. "You didn't really ask," she replied. He smiled slightly. "Fair." She followed him through high-ceilinged halls lined with oil portraits. Stern men with the same sharp jaw, same green eyes, same air of solemn inheritance. One portrait, older and darker than the rest, bore a brass plate, Giancarlo De Luca, 1949–1997. "Your father?" He nodded once. "He built everything we have, and everything that chains us." The admission carried a weight that didn't belong in marble halls. He led her into a side room, smaller, warmer, smelling faintly of cedar and ink. The walls were covered in sketches pinned with thumbtacks, bridges, cathedrals, city blocks rendered in confident pencil lines. "You drew these," she said, astonished. "Once," he answered, "before my father died." "You studied architecture?" "For a time. He wanted lawyers and soldiers. I wanted light and symmetry." His gaze softened. Dreams don't always survive inheritance. Isabella traced a finger along the edge of a drawing, a church spire backlit by clouds. "They survive if we build them anyway." Lorenzo's eyes met hers, and for a moment the room shrank around them. Two architects of different worlds, both haunted by foundations they didn't choose. "You see through walls," he murmured. "Not many people do." She smiled faintly. "You hide behind them." "Maybe. Or maybe I build them high enough to protect what matters." "From what?" His answer was quiet. "From everyone who wants to tear it apart." They dined in a small courtyard under a vine-draped pergola. No guards, no pretense. Only candlelight, the hum of crickets, the distant skyline like a memory. Over pasta and red wine, she asked what she hadn't dared before. "Tell me about your family." He was silent for a long time. Then, "Two brothers, one buried, one," a reminder. "Antonio," she guessed. A flicker crossed his face. "The eldest. He leads the family in the old ways. Fear, debt, silence. My father taught him tradition. He taught me conscience. It's an inconvenient mix." "So you're trying to change things?" "Trying," he said. "Change threatens those who live off the old order. My brother believes softness invites ruin. He calls compassion a crack in the wall. Maybe he's afraid compassion makes you human. Or mortal," Lorenzo said quietly. A wind stirred, carrying the scent of rain and rosemary. Isabella studied him across the table, the way candlelight painted warmth into the angles of his face. For the first time she saw not the commanding shadow who ruled rooms, but the man, the sun, beneath the crown. "What do you believe in?" she asked. He considered. "In loyalty, in beauty, in building something that outlasts the hands that made it." His gaze lingered. "In the rare people who make me want to be better." Her breath caught. "Lorenzo." But the word dissolved as he reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Not possession, but promise. The touch was warm, steady, unspoken. For a heartbeat, everything aligned. The pulse in her wrist, the glimmer in his eyes, the impossible hope that love could exist in a place like this. And then, from somewhere deep within the estate, a door slammed. Voices rose, sharp and urgent, cutting through the stillness. Lorenzo stiffened. "Stay here." "What's happening?" He was already standing. "Nothing you need to see." "Don't do that," she snapped. "Don't lock me out of your world when it's already closing around mine." He paused, torn. Then, quietly, "Please, Isabella." The plea in his voice unnerved her more than any order could. He disappeared down the corridor, footsteps fading into echo. Minutes dragged like hours. The wine cooled. The crickets fell silent. Somewhere beyond the walls, headlights swept the windows, too many to be coincidence. Isabella stood, her unease thickening. She followed the sound, voices in Italian, low and harsh. Through an archway she glimpsed them, men in suits, tension coiled in their shoulders, hands twitching near their jackets. And there, Antonio De Luca, older, broader, his presence heavy as thunder. His resemblance to Lorenzo was unmistakable, but where Lorenzo's gaze carried gravity, Antonio's held judgment. "You're soft, little brother," Antonio was saying. "You think you can rewrite the rules? The city respects fear, not mercy." "I'm not rewriting them," Lorenzo replied. "I'm ending the ones that break what we could build." Antonio laughed, cold, dismissive. "And this architect of yours? She's the reason you're losing focus. You forget what blood buys you." "She reminds me what it costs." Antonio's eyes narrowed. "Then maybe she's the one who'll pay it." A silence snapped taut between them. Isabella's breath caught. Lorenzo's voice lowered, dangerous. "Careful." "Or what?" Antonio stepped closer. "You'll choose her over the family?" Lorenzo didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. Antonio shook his head, muttering something to his men, then stormed past her unseen, the scent of cigar smoke trailing like a curse. When Lorenzo finally returned, his composure was armor again, his eyes shadowed. "You heard?" "Yes." He exhaled. "Then you know what's coming." "What does that mean?" "It means you should keep your distance. Until this resolves." She bristled. "I'm not a liability you can relocate." "No," he said, almost tender. "You're the only thing I can't replace." The honesty in his voice cut deeper than any command. He drove her home himself. Neither spoke. The city blurred past, a mosaic of headlights and rain. At her building, he walked her to the door, his hand hovering near hers like a question he wasn't ready to ask. "You once told me dreams don't survive inheritance," she said softly. "Maybe they do, if we fight for them." His eyes warmed. "You've never seen how hard a De Luca has to fight." "Then show me." He hesitated, then touched her cheek. Just once, gentle as breath. "Not tonight." When she stepped inside, her apartment felt smaller, quieter, lonelier than before. She poured herself a glass of water, set it down untouched, and turned toward the door. And froze. There, on the floor beneath the mail slot, lay a single object. A cufflink, silver, stained dark at the edge. Her pulse quickened. She knelt, fingertips brushing the faint smear. Dried blood, not hers. She stared at the tiny gleam of metal, the reflection of her wide eyes staring back, and realized something with bone-deep certainty. Lorenzo De Luca's world wasn't knocking anymore. It had already stepped inside. The cufflink glimmered under the weak light like a secret daring to be spoken. Isabella stared at it, heartbeat thrumming against her ribs, the smear of dried blood whispering truths Lorenzo had tried to bury in silence. She turned it over in her hand, silver warm from her skin, and every memory of the past weeks uncoiled. His sudden disappearances, the guarded glances of his men, the explosion at the site. All the questions she'd pushed aside sharpened into one unflinching thought. This was never just business. By the time she reached his office, night had swallowed the skyline. Villa De Luca's windows glowed gold, a lighthouse for the lost, or the guilty. The guards at the entrance stepped aside without a word. They knew her face now. Perhaps they pitied her. Lorenzo stood by the window, jacket draped across a chair, sleeves rolled, knuckles bruised and raw. The city lights reflected off the glass behind him, twin galaxies flickering in his eyes. He didn't turn when she entered. "You shouldn't be here this late," he said. "I found something." He stilled. Slowly, she crossed the room, opened her palm. The cufflink caught the light. "Whose blood?" she asked. Silence. "Don't lie to me." He sighed, weary, resigned, and faced her. A message needed to be delivered. Her voice trembled. "With blood. That's the language they speak. I thought you were different." "I am different," he said, stepping closer. "I don't kill to prove power. I act to keep order. To protect what we're building. To protect you." She recoiled. "Protect me? By dragging me into your war? You're already in it, Isabella. You were the moment you signed your name beside mine. That wasn't consent to violence. It was consent to reality. The words hit like steel. For a long moment neither spoke. The city beyond them pulsed, indifferent. Finally she whispered, "Who are you when I'm not looking?" His jaw tightened. "A man cleaning up the messes others make." "I don't believe that." "Then tell me what you believe." She met his gaze, sharp, searching. "That you want to be better. That you're fighting something you hate. But I can't build a life on half-truths and bloodstains." He closed the distance between them, his presence magnetic, dangerous, familiar. "You're right, you can't. Which is why I'll finish this, soon. Then you'll never have to see this side again." "And what if you can't?" "Then at least you'll know I tried." Something in his tone, the quiet fatalism, broke her. Because beneath the armor he sounded like a man ready to die for something he couldn't name. She reached out before she could stop herself, fingertips brushing his bruised knuckles. He flinched, not from pain, but from surprise. "You think you carry this alone," she murmured. "But every scar you hide leaves a mark on me too." Their eyes met, and the air between them shifted. From confrontation to confession, from fury to something softer. When he cupped her face, it wasn't command, it was reverence. "Isabella." "Don't apologize," she whispered. "Just don't shut me out." He kissed her then, not with arrogance, but with urgency, as if every second was borrowed, as if the world outside could crumble, and he'd still find her in the dust. The city disappeared. The past dissolved. There was only breath, warmth, the surrender of walls that had stood too long. Later, in the dim light of his penthouse, she traced the faint scar near his collarbone, the rhythm of his heartbeat steady under her palm. For once, Lorenzo looked unguarded, no empire, no mask, only the man. "Does it ever end?" she asked quietly. "What?" "The fighting, the fear." He stared at the ceiling. "Peace isn't given, Isabella, it's built, like everything else worth keeping." "And what are we building?" He turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "A future neither of us thought we deserved." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But even as his arm wrapped around her, even as sleep pulled her under, a shadow lingered, the memory of Antonio's warning. "She's the reason you're weak." Across the city, in a room where light dared not linger, Antonio De Luca poured 2 fingers of scotch into a crystal glass. Sofia Moretti stood by the window, gaze fixed on the street below. "She's become a problem," Antonio said. Sofia didn't turn. "She's just an architect. She's leverage." He swirled the glass, amber catching firelight. "My brother's lost his edge. Every empire that falls starts with a woman who makes the king forget his crown." Sofia's throat tightened. "You want me to—" He met her eyes, cold and certain. "If you can't bring Lorenzo back to reason, then you'll remove what clouds it." Her silence stretched. "You've known him longer than anyone," Antonio pressed. "Do this, and you'll have his trust again, his seat at the table, perhaps more." Sofia's pulse quickened. She remembered the years beside Lorenzo, the loyalty, the admiration that had soured into something sharp. She'd watched him fight for a dream that wasn't hers. And now, another woman held what she'd been denied. "Do we understand each other?" Antonio asked. "Yes," she said softly. He nodded. "Then fix the mistake." As he left, the door closing like a verdict, Sofia stared at her reflection in the glass, polished, poised, empty. Her mind whispered 2 words she'd long buried, "Not her." But the voice of survival was louder. At dawn, Isabella woke to find Lorenzo gone. A note rested on the pillow beside her, ink written with his deliberate hand. "Meet me at the site tonight. Sunset. We'll walk the frame together." She pressed the note to her chest, trying to ignore the echo of unease that lingered. The day unfolded in fragments, meetings, calls, workers seeking direction. But her focus slipped, haunted by images of bruised knuckles and silver cufflinks. By evening, the skyline burned orange. The building rose in silhouette, half-finished, defiant, beautiful. Lorenzo was waiting at the top floor, jacket off, sleeves rolled, wind tousling his hair. When he saw her, his face softened, the weight of the day dissolving. "You made it," he said. "Always." They walked the length of the steel frame together, the city sprawling beneath them. For a while, they didn't speak. Words seemed small against the horizon. Finally, Isabella turned to him. "When this is done, when it's real, what then?" He smiled faintly. "Then we build another, and another, until this city remembers what hope looks like." "And your family?" His smile faded. "Hope isn't contagious in their world." She touched his arm. "Maybe it can be." He looked at her, really looked, as if seeing a future he hadn't dared imagine. "You make me want to believe that." A sound cut through the wind, soft, sharp, like a click. Lorenzo froze, instinct flaring. He stepped in front of her, scanning the shadows. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't answer. His gaze locked on a distant rooftop, a flicker of movement against the dying sun. "Get down," he hissed. The crack of a rifle split the air. A bullet struck steel, sparking inches from her head. Lorenzo pulled her to the floor, covering her with his body, as shouts erupted below. His men were already moving, radios crackling, orders flying. Isabella's breath came ragged. "Who?" "Doesn't matter," he said, eyes blazing. "They just declared war." He helped her to her feet, his grip steady despite the tremor in her shoulders. "Go with Marco," he ordered one of his men. "Now." "I'm not leaving." "You are." His tone left no room for argument. "This isn't finished." As she was led down the stairs, heart pounding, Isabella glanced back. Lorenzo stood at the edge of the beam, wind whipping his shirt, gaze fixed on the skyline, on the unseen enemy that had just tried to take everything. Below, sirens wailed in the distance, and from a rooftop a block away, Sophia lowered the rifle scope, hands trembling, tears burning her eyes. She hadn't pulled the trigger, but someone had. And in the crosshairs of loyalty and love, the storm had finally begun. The city had recovered its rhythm, but Isabella hadn't. A week had passed since the shot rang out on the rooftop, and though the news called it a construction accident, every clang of metal still made her flinch. Workers whispered in corners, their eyes flicking toward shadows. The site buzzed with ambition and fear in equal measure. Lorenzo hadn't spoken of that night again. He doubled the security, reassigned crews, and met her questions with silence sharpened by guilt. The tension between them hummed like live wire, too hot to touch, too charged to ignore. Now, as dusk painted the half-finished tower in amber light, Isabella stood in the skeletal lobby, blueprint in hand, wondering when dreams had begun to look like battlefields. "Ma'am," her foreman called, "delivery for you." She turned. A sleek black envelope rested atop a crate, her name embossed in gold. She opened it carefully, a formal invitation, the kind printed on heavy cardstock that smelled faintly of wealth. "You are cordially invited to the DeLuca Foundation Gala, an evening in celebration of progress and renewal. The Waldorf, Saturday, 8 p.m. Her heart stuttered. There was no signature, but she knew who had sent it. When she showed it to Lorenzo that night in his penthouse, his expression flickered. Surprise, then caution. "You didn't send this?" "No." He took the card, eyes narrowing. "Antonio did." "Your brother?" He nodded once. "He's hosting. Every year, the foundation chooses a project to showcase. He must have chosen ours." "Then this is good, right? A chance to show the city what we're building?" "Maybe. Or maybe he's setting the stage." "For what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he traced the gold lettering with his thumb, lost in thought. "Antonio doesn't do anything without motive. If he wants you there, it's not just to celebrate." "Then we'll go together," she said. He hesitated. "It could be dangerous. So is everything else in my life lately." A small smile ghosted across his lips, admiration laced with fear. "You were never meant for quiet rooms, were you?" "I designed them," she said. "But I live in the noise." Saturday arrived with cruel precision. The Waldorf glittered under chandeliers, marble floors reflecting gowns and tuxedos like a hall of illusions. Photographers lined the entrance, flashes sparking like lightning. Isabella descended from the car in a midnight blue gown that clung like starlight. Her hair swept into soft waves, a silver pendant resting against her collarbone. She looked every inch the architect the city had fallen in love with. Poised, visionary, untouchable. Lorenzo offered his arm. "You take my breath away." She smiled faintly. "That's fair. You take everyone else's." He chuckled, a low, private sound, and guided her inside. The ballroom was a sea of power. Politicians, developers, CEOs sipping champagne while trading smiles sharper than knives. At the center stood Antonio De Luca, flanked by Sofia Moretti, her gown the color of spilled wine. "Brother," Antonio said warmly as they approached, "and the famous Miss Cruz, the city's darling." "Antonio," Lorenzo greeted, voice cool. "I didn't realize philanthropy had become part of your portfolio." Antonio's smile didn't reach his eyes. Even empires need good press. And what better face than hers? Isabella extended a hand. "Thank you for the invitation. I'm honored." "The honor's mine," Antonio said smoothly, kissing her knuckles with old-world charm. "It's rare to meet someone capable of inspiring my brother." Sofia watched silently, her expression unreadable, except for the faint tightness around her mouth. "Enjoy the evening," Antonio said. "We'll be announcing something special later. Don't wander too far." As they moved away, Isabella whispered, "What's he planning?" Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "Something theatrical. He's always loved an audience." For an hour, they mingled, shaking hands, deflecting questions, smiling for cameras. Investors praised her design, donors toasted urban renaissance. To everyone else, it looked like triumph, but beneath the champagne sheen, tension coiled. Sofia approached while Lorenzo stepped aside to speak with a senator. Her smile was brittle. "You wear the part well," Sofia said. "I'm not playing a part," Isabella replied. "Then you're the only one here who isn't." Isabella tilted her head. "You used to be close to him, didn't you?" Sofia's eyes darkened. "Close enough to know what happens when you become his weakness." "That's not what this is, isn't it?" Sofia's tone softened, almost pitying. "You think love will save him. But love doesn't cleanse blood, Isabella. It stains the hands that hold it." Before Isabella could respond, a sudden hush rippled through the crowd. Antonio had taken the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice rich and commanding, "tonight we celebrate progress, the kind that transforms cities and lives. The De Luca Foundation has always believed in building legacies. And this year, our legacy takes form in the Cruz Tower project." Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Isabella's pulse quickened. Antonio continued, "A bold vision, led by a bold woman. But courage, like architecture, requires foundation. And some foundations," he paused, letting silence stretch, "are not as solid as they seem." Murmurs stirred. Lorenzo stiffened. Antonio gestured toward the screens flanking the stage. "Transparency is the cornerstone of trust. So let us be transparent." The lights dimmed. Images flickered across the screens, city permits stamped and signed, financial transfers, documents Isabella had never seen. Each bore the same signature, Isabella Cruz. Her breath caught. "These," Antonio declared, "are falsified records, approved under Miss Cruz's name, tied to accounts linked to less than reputable sources." A wave of gasps rippled through the room. Lorenzo stepped forward. "Enough." Antonio's smile widened. "Am I wrong, brother? Or has your architect been busy laundering your goodwill through illegal contracts?" Isabella's knees threatened to give. "Those aren't mine. I never—" "I know," Lorenzo said sharply. "He forged them." Antonio spread his arms. "Prove it, or admit the truth. Love makes fools of us all." The room buzzed, guests whispering, phones already flashing. Reporters edged closer like vultures scenting blood. Lorenzo moved fast, taking Isabella's hand, pulling her toward the exit. "We're leaving. Lorenzo! Now!" They burst into the marble foyer, security flanking them. Outside, the night air hit cold and electric. A car waited at the curb. Lorenzo's engine idling. He opened the door for her, scanning the street, every muscle tense. "Get in," he ordered. She hesitated. What if this is exactly what he wanted? Before he could answer, a sudden roar tore through the night. The explosion shattered the sky. Glass rained down like stars, the force knocking her off her feet. Heat seared the air. The car, the one meant to take them home, was engulfed in flame. Lorenzo shielded her, arms wrapped around her as alarms wailed. People screamed, chaos bloomed. Through the haze, she saw Sofia standing near the entrance, face pale, eyes wide, frozen between guilt and horror. Lorenzo turned, fury etched in every line. "He won't stop," he hissed. "Not until one of us is gone." Smoke curled into the sky, carrying the scent of scorched metal and betrayal. Isabella clung to him, shaking, the truth dawning cold and cruel. The war Antonio had promised was here, and she was no longer a bystander. She was the target. Morning broke through the smoke. Manhattan's skyline shimmered under a pale sun, but every news screen screamed the same headline: Explosion at DeLuca Foundation. Gala, arson or assassination. Architect under fire. Isabella Cruz, implicated in corruption scandal. Her face filled every feed. A freeze frame from the gala, blue gown, stunned expression, innocence mistaken for guilt. By noon, reporters had gathered outside her apartment, microphones thrust like weapons, questions slicing through the air. "Did you falsify city records? Were you involved in the explosion? Is Lorenzo DeLuca funding illegal projects?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The city she wanted to build for was tearing down her name one headline at a time. Inside, curtains drawn, she watched the coverage with trembling hands. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Colleagues, clients, even her mother, each message a wound. When the door opened without a knock, she didn't flinch. Only one man would ignore locks. Lorenzo stepped in, dark suit dusted with ash, eyes rimmed with sleepless fury. Behind him, two of his men stationed themselves by the windows, silent sentinels. "You're on every screen," he said quietly. "I noticed. I'm pulling you out of the city. I have a place upstate." "No." He froze. "No? I'm not running, Lorenzo. Not from this, not again. They're framing you. The police will follow the money trail Antonio planted. The press will eat it. You'll be crucified. Then we fight back." Her voice cracked but didn't break. "You said this project was about hope, about rebuilding. Let me prove it. Let me finish what we started. You don't understand what Antonio is capable of. I do now." She stepped closer, eyes steady. "And if I let him destroy me, he wins. If I vanish, I become exactly what he says I am. Guilty, weak, disposable." He stared at her, the woman who'd walked into his storm by accident and now refused to leave it. "You're not disposable," he said softly. "You're the only thing I can't afford to lose." "Then don't protect me," she whispered. "Stand beside me." The next days blurred into a battle fought on too many fronts. Lorenzo met with lawyers and city officials in dimly lit offices, his presence alone enough to bend stubborn wills. Still, Antonio's influence was deep. Permits revoked, accounts frozen, allies turning cautious. Isabella spent her hours assembling evidence: receipts, design drafts, correspondence. Every scrap of proof that the project was clean. Sleep came in fragments. Food turned to dust. Rumors spread faster than truth. Anonymous sources spoke of mafia ties, bribed inspectors, shadow money. The development board postponed hearings. Construction halted. And still, she refused to break. One night, as rain streaked the windows, a knock echoed through her apartment. Lorenzo was away, meeting with someone, off the record. She opened the door cautiously. Sofia stood on the threshold, drenched and shaking. "Before you slam it," Sofia said, voice raw, "let me explain. You tried to kill me." "I didn't." Sofia's eyes glistened. "I was there, yes, but I didn't pull the trigger. I couldn't. Then who did? Antonio's men. He never trusted me to finish the job. He wanted witnesses, wanted me complicit. Why come here? Isabella demanded. Guilt? Because you need proof, and I have it. Sophia reached into her coat and pulled out a flash drive, sealed in plastic. Security footage from the Gala's garage. Shows Antonio's car, his men, the detonator. Isabella hesitated. Why help me now? Sophia's voice cracked. Because I used to love him too. And I know what it costs. For a heartbeat, they stood in silence. Two women bound by the same storm, both bruised by the same man. Come in, Isabella said finally. Sophia stepped inside, dripping water onto the floor. He won't stop, Isabella. He's already planting the next story, that Lorenzo ordered the hit himself to silence you. That's a lie. That doesn't matter. He owns the Echo. By the time truth catches up, the world's already moved on. So we move faster, Isabella said. We take this to the press, to the board, to everyone. Sophia hesitated. If you do this, you're painting a target on your back. I've been a target since the night I walked into that restaurant. Sophia studied her, the resolve, the fear, the quiet fire. He saw it too, you know. That's why he fell for you. Then help me make sure he doesn't lose everything because of me. Sophia nodded, something like peace flickering across her face. Tomorrow morning, Channel 4, I'll arrange it. As she turned to leave, Isabella touched her arm. Sophia, why stay in this world? Sophia's smile was bitter. Because it's the only one that ever saw me. That night, Isabella found Lorenzo in his study, sleeves rolled, maps and ledgers spread across the table. The air smelled of coffee and gun oil. She told him everything, Sophia's visit, the footage, the plan. When she finished, he stood silent, gaze fixed on the flickering lamplight. You trust her? He asked. I don't have to. I trust the evidence. He nodded slowly. Then we use it. Not we, she corrected. Me. I'll go on record. I'll clear my name. That makes you bait. I'm already bait. At least this way I choose the hook. He crossed the room, hands settling on her shoulders. Steady, warm, heavy with fear. If anything happens, it won't, she said, because you'll be watching. He searched her face, eyes full of everything he couldn't promise. Then, softly, you make me believe in things I shouldn't. She smiled, faint but fierce. Then believe in me. Morning came silver and sharp. Channel 4's studio buzzed with cameras, producers, the electric hum of breaking news. Isabella sat beneath the lights, microphone clipped, flash drive in hand. Lorenzo watched from a black SUV across the street, radio earpiece linked to his men stationed along the block. Every instinct screamed danger, but Isabella's voice in his mind, don't protect me, stand beside me, kept him rooted. Inside, the interviewer began. Miss Cruz, thank you for joining us. The city has questions. And I have answers, Isabella said. Her voice was calm, clear, steady. The Cruz Tower project was built on transparency and hope. The accusations are false, the documents forged. And tonight, I'll show you who's behind it. She gestured to the screen. The footage rolled, grainy, time-stamped, unmistakable. Antonio's men, unloading equipment, wiring detonators, placing the explosive charge near the car. Gasps rippled through the studio. This was the work of Antonio De Luca, Isabella declared. Not me, not Lorenzo. I have spent my life designing structures that unite communities. I won't let corruption turn them into weapons. The interviewer stared, stunned. You're risking everything coming forward like this. She met the camera's eye. The truth is worth everything. Applause broke from the crew. Small, genuine, hopeful. For the first time in weeks, Isabella breathed without fear. Outside, Lorenzo exhaled. She did it, he murmured. She. The line crackled. Sir, came Marco's voice. We've lost visual on her driver. What? Black sedan, East Alley. She's not inside. Lorenzo's blood ran cold. What do you mean she's not? A second voice cut in, panicked. Back exit breached. She's gone. He bolted from the car, heart pounding, shouting orders into the comm. By the time he reached the alley, only tire tracks remained. A van speeding into the morning traffic, tinted windows glinting. A single item lay on the pavement, her silver pendant, snapped clean at the chain. Lorenzo knelt, fist closing around it, breath ragged. Antonio's voice echoed from memory. "You'll choose her over the family?" Now the choice was gone. Antonio had made it for him. The pendant cut into his palm like a promise written in silver. Lorenzo stood in the alley, breath sharp, the city roaring around him while inside he went utterly still. The men at his back waited for orders. He gave none. Not yet. Rage was easy. Precision would save her. "Check every camera from 5th to Lexington," he said finally, voice low, controlled. "Streetlights, ATMs, traffic feeds. Pull the last 30 minutes. Marco nodded, already dialing. Lorenzo looked down at the pendant again. The clasp was snapped clean, not torn. She fought, a small comfort, a burning ache. He pocketed it and walked toward the waiting car. "Find Antonio," he said. Alive. By midnight, the city had become a map of red pins and moving dots. In a warehouse lit by monitors, Lorenzo watched footage flicker across screens. A black van sliding through intersections, turning into narrower streets until cameras lost it in the industrial maze near the river. "Zones controlled by the Cacciatori," Marco said. "Antonio's allies." "Then he's there," Lorenzo answered. "Or wants you to think he is." Lorenzo's eyes stayed on the screen. "Let him." He turned away, jaw set. "Double the men at every route in and out. If he wanted a trap, he'll get a war instead." Marco hesitated. "Sir, he knows you. He'll use her to slow you down." "That's his mistake," Lorenzo said. "He thinks love makes me weak. It makes me precise." Isabella woke to the hum of generators and the taste of dust. The room was small. Concrete walls, one light bulb, a locked door. Her wrists were bound, but loosely. They didn't expect her to fight. She sat up slowly, breathing through the panic. Her mind catalogued details, distance between sounds, airflow from the vent, the faint smell of river water. She'd studied spaces her whole life. Even a cage told a story. A figure appeared in the doorway, a man in a leather jacket, mid-30s, eyes wary rather than cruel. He carried a tray, water, bread, a folded blanket. "You should eat," he said in accented English. "I'm not hungry." "Still, you'll need strength." "Why am I here?" He hesitated. "Because the boss wants your man to come." "And you think he will?" He looked at her, really looked. "He's DeLuca. He always comes." She studied him in return. "What's your name?" "Luca." "You don't seem like the others." "I follow orders," he said. But the way his gaze flicked away told her there was still something human left beneath the loyalty. When he left, she began counting breaths, tracing cracks in the wall, anything to anchor herself. Somewhere beyond that door, Lorenzo was already moving. She could feel it, the same way she felt the weight of the city overhead, steel and heartbeat, grinding forward toward something inevitable. At dawn, Lorenzo met Sofia in an abandoned chapel near the waterfront. She'd come alone, hood pulled low, eyes hollowed by fear and guilt. "He has her," Lorenzo said. "I know." "Where?" Sofia shook her head. "He moves her every few hours, keeps no pattern. I tried to track the signal from his car, but enough excuses." His voice cracked like a whip. "I'm trying to help you." She snapped back. "You think you're the only one who cares what happens to her? Antonio's losing control, Lorenzo." "He's desperate. He wants you angry." He got what he wanted. She stepped closer. "Then use it, but smart. He's expecting a frontal strike. That's why he left a trail." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "So you brought another?" She nodded, sliding a flash drive across the pew. "Coordinates. From a courier he trusts. It's where he sleeps when he doesn't want to be found." He pocketed it. "Why are you doing this?" Sofia's voice softened. "Because once, I thought I could save you from what you were. She's the first one who actually might." Their eyes met, the ghost of their past hovering like incense smoke. Be careful, Sophia, he said. If Antonio finds out. He already knows, she murmured. I'm out of time. By afternoon, Isabella heard the argument beyond her door. Antonio's clipped Italian, a reply sharp as flint. Then silence, then footsteps receding. When Luca returned, his jaw was tight. We leave tonight. Where? He didn't answer. Instead, he knelt and loosened her bindings just enough for blood to flow. Don't try to run, he warned. I won't. But as he turned away, she whispered, You have someone waiting for you? He froze. My father used to say men with nothing to lose make the worst guards. You don't seem like one. He sighed low. I had a daughter. She died last winter. Fever. I'm sorry, Isabella said. Then you know what this will do to him. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Just closed the door a little too slowly. She waited until the footsteps faded, then slipped the hairpin from her braid. It wasn't much, but steel was steel. She began working at the rope, heart steady, breath slow. Every plan she'd ever drawn had begun with a single line. This would be hers. Night spread across the river like spilled ink. Lorenzo stood on the docks, black coat snapping in the wind, men positioned in the shadows, silent, armed, waiting. Marco approached, radio in hand. Scouts confirmed 2 vans, 5 men. She's inside. Lorenzo checked his weapon, movements precise. No mistakes. We go in quiet. Get her out. No one fires unless I say. Marco hesitated. And Antonio? Lorenzo's gaze hardened. If he stands in my way, he's not my brother anymore. They moved out, shadows among shadows, boots whispering over gravel. The warehouse loomed ahead, hulking and dark, windows like blind eyes. Lorenzo signaled. 2 men cut the power. The building sank into blackness. Inside, Luca looked up at the sudden silence. He turned toward Isabella and froze. The ropes lay in coils at her feet. The hairpin glinted in her hand. You shouldn't have... Help me, she said. He shook his head. They'll kill us both. Then let's give them something else to aim at. He stared, torn. Then slowly, he pressed a finger to his lips and nodded toward the back wall. There's a service door, leads to the docks. Footsteps thundered above, Antonio's men, alerted by the blackout. Luca grabbed her wrist, pulling her into the shadows. Outside, Lorenzo's team breached the front, a flash of steel and whispered orders. Gunfire shattered the stillness. Isabella ducked behind a beam, heart hammering. The door ahead burst open. Lorenzo, eyes blazing, sweeping the room. Isabella! She stumbled forward. Here! He reached her in 2 strides, pulling her close, scanning for blood. Are you hurt? No, but... A voice cut through the chaos. Little brother. Antonio stepped from the mezzanine, flanked by armed men. Smoke curled around him, eyes gleaming like a wolf in torchlight. You brought an army for a woman, he sneered. I brought one to end you. Antonio laughed, raising his gun. Then do it. Show them what kind of king you are. Lorenzo leveled his weapon, finger trembling, not from fear, but memory. You killed my peace. You touch her again. I kill my blood. You already did, Antonio spat, when you chose her. The standoff crackled, air heavy with gunpowder and history. Then, a shot, not Lorenzo's. Antonio staggered, shock flashing across his face, hand clutching his side. Behind him, Sophia lowered her pistol, tears streaking her cheeks. I told you, she whispered. I'd fix my mistakes. Antonio fell, the light leaving his eyes like dusk fading to night. Lorenzo stared, grief, rage, relief colliding. Sophia met his gaze once more. Go, before they regroup. Luca appeared at Isabella's side, pressing the service door open. Now. They ran, through smoke and shadow, into the night air sharp with salt and sirens. By the time they reached the docks, reinforcements swarmed the warehouse. Lorenzo turned back once, watching the flames begin to climb, an empire burning from its own cracks. Isabella gripped his hand. It's over, she whispered. He shook his head. Not yet. The city still thinks we're guilty. Then we'll build again, she said. But this time, with light. Sirens wailed closer. The sky flared red, and somewhere behind them, the lion's den turned to ash, along with the last bond between brothers. The city awoke to sirens and headlines, but for the first time in months, Isabella Cruz didn't flinch at the sound. The truth had finally clawed its way into the light. Footage from the raid, Sophia's confession, Luca's testimony, Antonio's long shadow collapsing, had made its way to every newsroom, every courtroom, every whisper in the streets. By noon, the anchors spoke her name with reverence, not suspicion. New evidence clears architect Isabella Cruz of wrongdoing in the De Luca project scandal. Sources confirm Antonio De Luca was behind the falsified permits and attempted assassination. The world had changed overnight. So had she. Still, vindication came with weight. Sophia was gone, surrendered to the police before dawn, leaving a single note in Lorenzo's hand. Tell her I'm sorry. And Antonio's empire, inherited by violence and hollowed by pride, now belonged to a man who wanted nothing to do with it. Lorenzo stood beside Isabella on the balcony of her apartment, sleeves rolled, sun rising over the skyline they'd fought to reclaim. For once, his eyes held no calculation, only quiet exhaustion and relief. It's over, she whispered. He shook his head softly. No, it's beginning. In the weeks that followed, the city watched something extraordinary unfold. The Cruz Community Center rose from the ashes, steel beams glinting like resolve, glass panels catching dawn's light like redemption. Construction crews worked day and night. Permits were reinstated. Investors returned, drawn by courage that refused to yield. Lorenzo sold his father's remaining properties, dissolved the shell companies, and redirected every dollar into legitimate ventures: housing, education, restoration. What's the point of a crown, he said, if it only builds walls? The newspapers began to call him the reluctant prince, the man who traded power for purpose. He ignored them all. The only opinion that mattered was standing beside him in a hard hat, blueprint in hand, dirt on her boots. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't watching, he'd trace her pendant, newly repaired, gleaming against her collarbone, like a talisman that reminded him of everything fragile and worth protecting. 3 months later, the city gathered beneath the finished tower. Reporters, families, city officials, all eyes lifted toward the gleaming facade, the one that bore 2 names carved in stone: Cruz Community Center, a vision for those who build and those who dream. Mayor Grant stood at the podium, cameras flashing. "This isn't just a building," she declared. "It's proof that light can bloom even through concrete, that integrity can outlast corruption." Applause thundered. Isabella's hands shook as she held the ceremonial scissors, gold against her skin. "Ready?" Lorenzo murmured beside her. She smiled, not the careful one she used to wear at board meetings, but the kind born from battles survived. "Let's cut it together." The ribbon fell. The crowd erupted. Children rushed inside, their laughter echoing off marble floors. Murals of color and life stretched across the walls, painted by local artists. A rooftop garden awaited its first seedlings. In the heart of the atrium, a plaque bore the inscription Isabella had written herself: "May every stone laid in struggle rise toward the light." Lorenzo read it in silence, then turned to her. "You built hope out of ruin." "We built it," she corrected. Later, as twilight brushed the city in gold, they climbed the tower's final stairwell to the rooftop. Below, the streets pulsed with life, families moving into new apartments, shop lights flickering on, a saxophone drifting from somewhere unseen. The heartbeat of a city reborn. Isabella leaned on the railing, wind tugging at her hair. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't walked into the wrong restaurant?" He smiled faintly. "You'd be designing skyscrapers for someone else, and I'd still be pretending redemption isn't real. Do you regret it?" He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, gaze sweeping the skyline. "Regret surviving? No. Regret waiting this long to live? Maybe." She rested her hands over his. "Then live now." For a moment they simply breathed. The city below, the the stars above, the ghosts between. Lorenzo turned her gently to face him. When I met you, I thought fate was a cage. You showed me it can be a door. And what's on the other side? He smiled, eyes soft. Home. Their lips met. Slow, sure. No fire this time, only warmth. The kind of kiss that mends rather than burns. When they parted, Isabella glanced toward the skyline. Cranes and rooftops silhouetted against a horizon painted with possibility. So what now? She asked. Now, Lorenzo said, slipping his hand into hers. We keep building. She laughed, light, free, and rested her head against his shoulder. Beneath them the city glittered. The tower stood tall, not a monument to power, but to perseverance. Some wrong turns, she thought, don't lead to dead ends. They lead to destiny. And as night fell over steel and glass, Isabella Cruz and Lorenzo De Luca watched their world shine, proof that even in a city built on shadows, love could still draw the brightest line. If you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That's how I'll know you truly liked it. Even if you're watching on your TV, grab a second to join this family of fans who love emotional and heartfelt stories. Your support means everything, and it helps us bring you even more tales like this one.